Good afternoon and thanks for joining us here on Midday Live. I am Wendy Lai. First, our headlines for this afternoon. Price hikes of foodstuffs and other essential items in Accra following partial lockdown to be enforced in 13 hours. Disinfection of Kaswa and Nsawam markets in the central and eastern regions underway ahead of the 2-week partial lockdown. And on the international front, UK Prime Minister warns that the virus, that's the novel coronavirus crisis, will get worse before it gets better in a letter to be sent to every UK household. I've got the details of these stories and many more lined up this afternoon. Let's start with our stories, and we'll bring you updates on the novel coronavirus across the country, and we'll bring you some more updates from the regions as well. And prices of foodstuffs in Accra have shot up following the March 30 partial lockdown announced by government. A number of shoppers expressed concern about the increasing prices resulting in the COVID-19 outbreak, and many people have taken to panic buying following the 1 a.m. Monday partial lockdown of the country, with majority of them defying the social distancing directive by government. And Olonka, that's 6 cups of gari, or locally also known as the American tin, which was initially sold at 7 cedis, went for 30 cedis, with a bucket of tomatoes sold at 40 cedis, now going for 80 cedis. Now, vegetables such as cabbage, pepper, cucumber and onions had also seen increase in prices. Shoppers at the various markets said they had no option but to buy the items at the new but exorbitant prices. Now let's go on the phone lines and speak with a trader who is also a former national coordinator of the Informal Hawkers and Vendors Association of Ghana, Juliana Brown Aferi. Thanks for agreeing to speak with us, Juliana. Good afternoon.
Thank you, my dear. Good afternoon.
Now, first question is that, are you worried that we did see such huge increases in price of goods across Accra, Kumasi and Tema?
Well, I am indeed worried. And I've also noticed it because yesterday I was in the market trying to buy things for my mom. And the money I carried couldn't even buy half of it. So at the moment, those of the informal sectors who are listening to us, I will appeal to them. It's not this time that all of us are talking about this virus issue, praying that God will remove this. I don't know whether it's a curse or an issue that the whole world is talking about. If this is not the time that people should make money out of this sickness, I will appeal to them. All the leaders should speak to the market queens. Those who are in charge of markets, they should try and speak to the marketeers so that this one will not spoil our name. This is not the time that we will use to make more profit. After the sickness, or if God permits and all this thing goes down and everything is over, we will be ashamed because we will not get this huge money from our customers, and then maybe some of them will even leave us, will not come into us again. I'm talking about this because we are informal sector workers. I know that you cannot sit without eating. And not because of this issue, you use it to make huge money. I'm appealing again. Now, they should know that this country is a God-fearing country. If all of us say we are worshiping God, we should put everything aside and reduce the prices so that a layman, a poor person who doesn't have money, can also buy something to the house. I know that the issue is from tomorrow going. If no one can buy anything to the house to eat, then how are we going to survive this coronavirus? I am appealing.
If I can come in there, you're appealing to people not to increase prices, but you're a trader yourself. Am I right?
I am a trader in Makola market.
Have you also in any way made some adjustments or increased prices of what do you sell?
I am a crop seller, and I know that because of this sickness, nobody is buying crop. So I intentionally didn't go to the market at all.
So you haven't increased your prices?
I have not. I have not.
Now,
and I would say that I think people buy their goods from different angles, different places. Yes, so we shouldn't use this sickness or this thing that has happened into the country to be something like an opportunity to get huge money. Talking about sterilizer, I don't know.
Now, before we even heard of the lockdown in parts of the country from the president, there were initial concerns that indeed prices had gone up, even before the last week issue and then what we saw over this weekend. Now, you've mentioned that there are market queens, the leaders in these markets, and they are aware of the situation. Above them, what do you think we should do as a country if this lockdown should be continued to some other parts of the country, if that should happen?
This gone Monday, when they did the cleaning in Makola market, after that, some of us met, and we decided that we should speak to our market women so that they will increase those prices. Otherwise, it will be a bad name for us. And also, I will appeal to the government. Any help he has for those who don't have it. I learned they said they will put some rice and things in a car to be going around to give those who don't have food to eat. And I also thank the president and his team for not closing the whole country. Even only these two regions, look at what is happening. I will appeal to them to look at things critically, look at how best they will be able to help us. They are saying that the informal sector, our educational background is low. And yes, so if there is any decision, some of us are not sitting anywhere to speak to the issue. I think from now going, they will be inviting some of us to come and speak to the issue that is affecting the informal sector. To also contribute their quota to the development of the country.
All right, now I would also want to find out from you. I think we did know that early on there were some interactions with market leaders, but another factor is a bit about social distancing. As leaders in the markets, how are you ensuring that this happens? Because yesterday there were a lot of people in the markets, and there's been news about social distancing and the relevance of social distancing and implications of not going according to that. Going forward as a leader and with the rest of your team or your colleagues, how are you going to ensure that indeed there will be social distancing in the markets?
It is very dangerous. What is going on in and around our market is very dangerous. And because I've already said that our educational background is low, I was thinking that the health ministry will do some grammar, looking in local languages to be able to educate the women. Because some of them can't understand English. Some of them can't speak Ga, some of them can't speak Chi. So if there is this grammar things that they will be able, the health ministry, they should put something like audio vans going around, speaking to the informal sector workers, those who don't understand English. Even if you ask them what is going on, they don't know. They say some sickness. What sickness? They don't know. So I will appeal to them that this social distance is something that the informal sector workers cannot obey the rules. Because if you want somebody to buy for you, unless you hold the person's hand, stop the person to come and buy for you, and that is not good. I think the education should go on well for the informal sector. That is 88%, 89% in this economy. That is contributing their quota. If they are not in the market, people will not get food to eat. So the government should also include us in the development of the country about education. Education, a lot of education should go in for informal sector workers. If something like this happened, those who cannot speak English, maybe I am trying, but some of them cannot speak, read and write. So I will appeal to the authorities. If there is any videos, CDs, and things that they will put it on air, those who are watching they can watch it and also educate themselves with it.
Right,
or maybe send some people who are in charge of informal sector to come closer to us. We don't know which ministry is responsible for us. We are selling. We know trade. We know gender. But which of the ministry is really responsible for us? We don't know. I am sad because I am now in Achimota market trying to buy things for my mother, and it's not easy. It's not easy. The education should go on well. A lot of publicity should go on well. Those who are in charge should visit this market and then put some things in place. There is law. If there is law, those who are in charge of us should visit us and know what is going on the ground so that we can share our issues.
Thank you very much, Juliana Aferi. She's a market leader as well, and she gave us their take on what needs to be done on education and what they will also be doing in the markets on the back of what happened yesterday at various markets across the country, particularly in the areas affected by the lockdown. There's more, and the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Creative Arts, Barbara Otinjesi, has proposed to market queens to consider rotational selling to effectively comply with the social distancing directive at the country's markets. She stated that market queens should begin discussions with their members to consider a roster among the various categories of sellers in their markets. The Tourism, Arts and Culture Minister, who is also the Member of Parliament for Prestea-Huni Valley, Barbara Otinjesi, offered the suggestion when she presented Veronica buckets, hand sanitizers and toiletries to market queens and transport unions in the Western region on behalf of the President through the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. The Minister suggested, for example, if there are 20 onion sellers at one point, their number could be halved so that they sell on different days. She explained that since the country has recorded some local coronavirus infections, the market queens should consider measures that will help prevent spread. According to her, as the country looks for ways to prevent the spread of the coronavirus, it will be important for people to go out only when necessary. Let's get some more stories. And products from hand sanitizers, medical supplies have been astronomically increased, and in some countries there are laws to prevent people from making unfair profits from emergency situations like this current one. Shortly we'll be speaking to a legal practitioner to find out and also ensure that we understand whether there is any legal remedy for this in Ghana, and if we indeed can follow suit from what others are doing. Good afternoon, Bobby Banson, and we're grateful for your time, Counsel.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
Now, is there any law that prohibits surge in prices of goods like we're seeing now?
Well, unfortunately, system does not make room for any law that directly controls price. I think the only aspect of our economy that there's price control is with the fuel and other government utilities, things that are supplied by the government. So you talk about utilities like water, electricity, and then with the fuel. Apart from that are sold on the open market, government does not control it. At least there's no law that gives the government the authority to control it. Because as you might be aware, we are in a purely capitalist society where every law that we make is backed by that ideology of capitalism. And so people are entitled to import or manufacture at their own cost and then sell it at their own cost. So the basic economics theory of demand and supply come to play. So where there's high demand with low supply, then the prices will go up. So as it stands now, there's no law that backs it, that gives the government the power to regulate prices apart from the 7 commodities there's already government control, like fuel and other utilities. And we're expecting that with the Restriction Act that was recently passed, the authority to impose certain restrictions, they would have considered imposing restrictions on such prices, but I think that was based on the government, and I'm sure the current situation will give the government the right to pass an executive instrument to put further restrictions in terms of prices for a certain period of time.
Now, some countries have taken some action. What will be your advice to government going forward in dealing with this problem?
Yes, like I just indicated, the law that has just been passed gives the president some wide powers, and that would include the restrictions on prices of goods and services during such emergency periods. And so the president can pass executive instruments like what has just been passed on Friday or so to restrict the prices of goods and services beyond the last price that it was being sold for. But then again, you'd have to look at ways of enforcing such laws.
So I was going to ask you about enforcement, because that is an issue here in our country. How are we going to ensure? I just spoke to a market leader who said that, one, some of them are illiterate, they don't even understand English, they see some promos on television on COVID-19 and they don't even really get it, the issue about social distancing and the like. If that should happen with what you're proposing, how can we ensure that there's indeed proper enforcement?
Well, the only means of enforcement I can think of is when government send, ghost inspectors to go into the market, into the shops, to find out how these people are selling these items, how much they are selling these items. And then there'll be some quick courts or tribunals that would be able to punish, people who are flouting this law. Not to say that we should go back to that regime, but, in the military regimes, they had means of checking prices, and they had means of, letting people face the law if they breach these price regulatory regimes. And so we can do it, but not by means of a kangaroo court, but by means of properly laid down procedure for punishing people who fail. The government can send ghost inspectors into the market to go and then check, sort of buy these items, sample them and buy them, and then see the prices for, and then take the necessary step to punish those who flout the law. Mm-hmm. I believe that is what must be done in these times. There must be an executive instrument to that effect.
Well, thank you very much, Bobby Banks. He's a legal practitioner. We're looking at price hikes and what can be done to ensure that this problem is dealt with. Now, there is a mixed feeling and panic in Wale Wale in the West Mampusi district of the Northern region as hundreds of headquarters, popularly known as Kai, arrived home fleeing the lockdown in Accra and Kumasi. Some residents who spoke to TV3 say they suspect some of them might be carriers of COVID-19. Zubaida Ismail has more in this report.
Several headquarters come from the northeast region. They have migrated to cities like Accra, Kumasi and Techiman. Wale Wale is a transit municipality at all districts and communities in the northeast region. Thus, when traveling to the cities and returning, passengers will have to make stops in Wale Wale. The worry of residents is that most headquarters do not self-quarantine on arriving home. It is an unpleasant scene when a headquarter arrives. Checks revealed most of the headquarters arrived on Friday, March 27, but were not isolated as protocols demand. Transport organizations, however, say they are taking precautions when transporting the headquarters back home.
We always come into contact with these headquarters. They are coming in their numbers and we are scared. We have bought some sanitizers to protect ourselves.
Hand washing is common in fighting the pandemic.
This is a public place. So many people come around. They book tickets to Kumasi, Accra, and other places like Tamad and Techiman and other places. We also provided vertical buckets outside there. Before they enter the car, they will have to wash their hands properly under the running water with soap before they come. As well as when they get to the gate of the car, we give them the hand sanitizers and they rub their hands before entry.
Now, still staying with our markets, and disinfection of the Kaswa and Nsawam markets are underway following Monday's partial lockdown. The exercise should have been conducted at a later date, but had to be brought forward for the impending lockdown. And that's due to that. Our reporter, Frederick Clarence Williams, has been monitoring the exercise, and he joins me via phone. Hello, Frederick.
Yeah, hello.
Now, where exactly are you, and tell us about the process so far?
Yeah, currently I'm at the Insawam market centers. And what happened was that as early as 5:30, the local government team moved to Kasua New and Old Market and did the fumigation exercise. That is disinfection exercise to ensure that all the market centers are well disinfected. What happened was that today happened to be the last day for the lockdown, but the residents are in Kasua comply, making sure that all shops are locked. Nobody ever open his or her shop at Kasua Market. And currently I'm at Insawam. Looking at the centers of Insawam, we have about 3 market centers. We even went ahead to the prisons, and then they did the fumigation exercise there. And Wendy, I can tell you that every citizen at where we visited so far comply with the rules and regulations.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that update, Frederick Clarice Williams, and he's our reporter following the fumigation exercise at some markets in Kasua and in Sawam. But we're still moving on, and still in relation to COVID-19, the Ghana Union of Traders Association has directed its members and the trading public to comply with the directives given by the president for the lockdown. A statement signed by its president, Joseph Obing, urged members to consider the serious health implications if traders continue to do things as usual. He advised members to practice the precautionary measures in the lockdown areas, adding that to contain the spread, all must also stay home. Let's focus on health, and some 10,000 health personnel and allied professionals attending to COVID-19 pandemic patients have been secured in a special life insurance cover. The Minister of Health, who signed the notice to all heads of the health agencies, has asked that the appropriate documentation be done to facilitate the next steps. All frontline staff involved in the response have been insured under the following insurance cover: life group 350,000 cedis per life, critical illness 25,000 cedis per life, and total temporary disability all causes 10,000 cedi per life. The total premium is estimated at over 10 million Ghana cedis. Still focusing on healthcare, and some self-employed residents in Accra have appealed to government to provide some support in the course of the 2-week restriction to movement as the country strives to contain COVID-19 pandemic. Now, they said the directive, which comes into force on Monday, will cripple their businesses and their means of survival.
The Zoe Temple of the International Central Gospel Church presented essential items estimated at 15,000 cedis to the hospital.
Church is about people, and the virus is infecting people. People are dying, and we don't want to wait for something serious to happen before we do the little that we can do to help.
The Tema General Hospital is one of the designated centers for the treatment of COVID-19 patients. The medical director of the hospital, Richard Anthony, was appreciative of the gesture and called on all to comply with the precautionary measures,
which will go a long way in augmenting what we already have. These are items of daily use for infection prevention.
The Zoe Temple has declared 14 days fasting and prayers for the nation.
We are praying that people will be conscious. They will be conscious and mindful of social distance. They'll be conscious and mindful of washing their hands. They should be conscious and mindful of using sanitizers.
The church urged residents in the Tema metropolis to comply with the lockdown.
That the peace of God shall be available.
More on COVID-19, and as the pandemic unfolds, journalists on the beat can't switch off and the work could be overwhelming despite the global stress. Work must go on. This is Media General's newsroom. Eileen staff on duty. This is not the number on a normal day, but we definitely are not in normal times. We all need to stay safe by practicing social distancing. But the work must go on. Prior to Ghana recording cases, our reporters spread across the country developed stories related to coronavirus. Technology is being utilized. News anchors on different platforms and other essential departments work hard to bring the public up-to-date news. How has journalism been impacted by the pandemic? Two journalists, a Rwandan and Palestinian, share their experiences. Both countries are under lockdown.
Only essential service providers are allowed to get out of their homes. So these people who are allowed to get out of their houses and drive around have stickers issued by the police.
Working hours, it's based on shifts, dividing throughout the 14 days between the employee. Some employees will work 14 days, and while others are right now in quarantine, then everyone will swap shifts.
What about safety measures?
The Palestine TV has distributed special uniforms that protect the journalists and cameramen who are working in the streets, and I feel safe.
I feel safer when I'm working from home, and I feel not safe enough when I'm on field because I tend to touch many objects. I tend to share a microphone with people.
According to the Global Investigative Network, topics that have been heavily covered include government's preparedness, hospital readiness, the supply of equipment, officials telling the truth, and commercial exploitation. On March 23, Reuters.com reported of a White House reporter suspected of having contracted the coronavirus. The White House Correspondents Association raised questions about the viability of press briefings that gather dozens of journalists and the Trump administration officials in a single room each day. CNN on March 24 reported on a prominent 30-year-old television journalist who died in Zimbabwe after contracting COVID-19, the first person to die in the country from the virus. Zororo Makamba was one of the two people who tested positive for the coronavirus. NBC News on March 20 reported the death of its longtime employee, Larry Edgeworth, 61, an audio technician, but also suffered from other health issues according to his wife. For instance, journalists who are assigned to Ghana's Parliament House are still reporting from there as the House is still in session, although some parliamentarians have been asked to self-isolate.
We are not too sure who we have come into contact with. The reports are quite numerous, flying in here and there. Looking at the nature of our work as journalists, we need to get the job done.
The Speaker, Professor Aaron Michael Quay, asked all staff except those identified as providing essential services critical to the legislative business currently taking place in the House, or a matter referred by the House for an urgent consideration, to proceed on their annual leave with immediate effect. All officers on contract or temporary appointment, MP research assistants, and other ancillary service providers working in the premises are also required to take their leave or keep away in a bid to decongest Parliament for a safe conduct of essential business. Despite the adrenaline to get the work done, fatigue sets in. The Ghana Journalists Association is advising journalists to adhere to health and safety protocols. But for the journalists reporting on the outbreak, it is indeed overwhelming. When you say a prayer, remember to say one for journalists as well. Wendy Lai, TV3 News. Remember, we're also risking it, so keep praying for us. Let's move on. And on Saturday, March 28, TV3 telecast a video on News at 10, which captured some military men with a voice-over claiming they were all out to deal with the recalcitrant citizens in Kumasi during a partial lockdown announced by His Excellency, the President. TV3's attention has been drawn to the fact that the said footage is an old one with no correlation to the subject matter. TV3 regrets the harm, damage or loss suffered and distress our broadcast of the said video may have caused the military and other related agencies as well as our cherished viewers, and we therefore do apologize unreservedly. You're still watching Midday Live, and current update is that Ghana's COVID-19 cases has risen to 152. We'll bring you more details after this break. Do stay with us.
Cocoa dairy-free coconut milk. Cocoa dairy-free coconut milk is a fully plant-based milk, non-curdling in tea or coffee, and is a lovely treat with any breakfast beverage or meal. It contains calcium and vitamin D2 for strong teeth and bones, and vitamin B12 to help boost your blood for vitality. Cocoa is 100% vegetarian and is approved by the Vegetarian Society of UK. It's also lactose and dairy-free, which is good even for people with lactose intolerance. Cocoa, get one today. Cocoa dairy-free coconut milk. Nature's health at your doorstep. For bulk purchases, contact 027-444-0180. This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the FDA. Cocoa dairy-free coconut milk.
The race to be crowned the next most talented kid in Ghana is heating up. Contestants have stepped up to the challenge with jaw-dropping performances. Our seasoned judges are fired up and ready to discover that amazing talent. Who will win the 10,000 Ghana cedis cash, 15,000 Ghana cedis educational scholarship, and the trip abroad, and earn the bragging rights of being Ghana's? There will be no studies. Record a video of your child or children showing their talent and send to this WhatsApp number. Each week, the child with the